Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde, and welcome to our AI Institute webcast. My name is Audrey Jensen, and I have the privilege of leading our AI Institute in Canada. In a world where data is becoming ever more abundant and where pressures for organizations to monetize data or use it to create AI or Gen AI models is increasing, we wanted to make sure that we dedicate an AI Institute webcast to the very important topic of data governance. Before I introduce to you our panelists, I did want to say that while this event is a webcast, we would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of the lands that we are on today. Deloitte Canada has offices with representation across most of the country, and we acknowledge that our offices reside on traditional, treaty, and unceded territories as part of Turtle Island, which is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. All right, let's start by taking a poll. Let's start by asking you, before we go into data governance in the era of Gen AI, let's talk about data governance maturity first. I think it's important that we anchor on the key foundations. So we'd love to ask you today a quick question. When you think about your organization, how would you qualify your data governance, your data management maturity? Is it low? Is it medium? Or is it high? Let's quickly poll you, get a quick pulse check, and then we'll move on. Encouraging you to assess your organization on your data governance maturity very quickly. We'll give you a few more seconds, and then we'll reveal results from our latest Deloitte survey. All right. Let's see this. So we've got about 27% of you mentioning you have low maturity, 55 in the medium category, and 18 are high. That's an amazing result. I want to say that this team or audience is definitely in the higher ranges. And that's a great sign because according to our latest AI ecosystem report, we found that only 36% of Canadian organizations are in those either the high or the medium maturity. So kudos to you for joining in today and sharing that those higher levels of maturity. We appreciate it. All right, thank you, Atif, for helping me with the poll. You know, it is my pleasure to introduce three panelists today, three leaders that are going to share with you both their data governance to date, like how they've been able to build solid foundations. And the second part will be them answering questions on how they've been handling and dealing with the Gen AI era, what they have been changing, what they have been reprioritizing, in light of this technology wave that we've all been witnessing. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is Marcela Hernandez. Marcela is the Chief Data Officer at the University of British Columbia, also known as UBC. She has over 20 years experience in data management and analytics in higher education. Marcela has experience in both the private and public sector, leading the development of data management practices and enabling data-driven decision-making in other organizations. Marcela, thank you for being with us today.
Audrey, thank you, and thanks for having me here. I really like the idea of talking about how we have done data governance at UBC. Higher ed presents a more complex environment, really, for governing the data. And so I'm really happy to be able to show a little bit of the work we have done in UBC around data governance.
Sounds good, Marcella. Definitely that data management and data governance doesn't happen in a vacuum, definitely within a context. And yes, I'm sure each of you can share the complex environments that you're handling, and how you're handling that complexity will be certainly critical. Thanks for that, Marcella. Next, we have Curtis Ho. Curtis is the Director of Data Governance at the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, also known as MPAC. Curtis has spent more than 20 years working in IT and data domains, specializing in cybersecurity and transformation. He's had the opportunity to work in both private and public sectors, which has given him a broad understanding of industry challenges and effective solutions. Additionally, Curtis has been involved in outsourcing and global transformation, which equips him really well in the ever-changing landscape of modern technology, AI, and data transformation. Curtis, glad you could join us today.
Well, thank you so much, Audrey, and great to be, thanks for having me here today, and great to be here. Data governance has been pretty much bread and butter for the last couple of years of my life, and so love to share a lot of my experience that we have been through in a couple of years building this data governance office, and then also some of the insights that we might be leading into the Gen AI of the world as we move into the next stage. So thank you, Audrey.
Lovely. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Curtis. Our third panelist is Colin Rogers. Colin is Deloitte Canada's Privacy and Confidentiality Officer, where he oversees privacy, confidentiality, information management, and data governance programs across Canada and Chile. For over a decade, Colin has advised senior leaders on hundreds of Deloitte projects, and he has equipped teams to deliver innovative solutions that strengthen the trust between Deloitte, its client, its people, and its communities. Outside of Deloitte, he serves on the advisory board of the Canadian Council for Chief Privacy Officers. Colin, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Audrey. Ton of fun to be here. I'm honestly happy. I'm excited to be able to connect with like-minded friends, both on the panel as well as in the audience. And I can sort of talk a little bit about how, as I walk my own data literacy journey at the firm, including the responsibility for data governance, it's really awesome to see how, like Marcella, it's become very clear to me that data governance is a group effort, and it's not something that anybody has to take alone. There's an enormous opportunity to adopt and to adapt as we grow, and so it's great to be here and chat about that.
Super. Thanks, Colin. Let me share with you, audience team members, the three main themes that we'll cover. That way, if we don't cover something that you have on your mind, you can use the Q&A function to pose your question. We'll have time towards the end for our panelists to respond to you, so don't hesitate to type it up en anglais ou en français. So first, I'll be asking each one of them, what data governance efforts they've been driving over the past few years to drive their foundations to get to where they are today. So question one is very much pre-Gen AI. The second question will be, since November, or more realistically, since February or of this year, what have been the efforts of their respective organizations to handle generative AI and think about new ways of potentially using generative AI to advance data governance? So that will be our second question. And then third, we will project ourselves in time. We'll project ourselves in 2028, and we'll try to think about how data governance using technologies such as generative AI, but not limited to it. What will data governance 5 years from now look like? All right, so be ready to travel in time with us. First, let's take a few steps backwards in the past, and let me ask you, Marcella, to tell me, what have been some of the foundations, some of the initiatives that make you particularly proud of your data governance journey at UBC? Talk to us, Marcella. Are you on mute?
My bad, sorry. In UBC, we started data governance back in 2018. This was as a result of issues we were having when we were reporting. And we found that definitions just didn't mesh. And therefore, results and recommendations were completely different. So that triggered the need to have something to create an initiative of data governance. I started at that time with a maturity model for ensuring, like, to see where UBC was. It was fairly straightforward because we didn't have anything. And so I was asked to bring in UBC into being a more mature organization when it comes to managing the data. The first initiative was putting a strategy together. And in the strategy, we put together what were the pillars that we want to work on. So the first thing was data literacy. Data literacy involving the community in the data governance initiative. And for me, that was a really important one because I literally had to go place by place to explain to people what data governance meant and what I was trying to do. And educate people on that area. And so since then, every initiative we do, we move the needle a little bit in data literacy across the institution. Data stewardship, which in a way is part of data literacy, is just taking a smaller audience of the university and training them so that they pay special attention to data. We selected our data stewards. We have 150 trained data stewards who look after different aspects of data governance. They are now working very closely with enterprise data governance, which is my team, to manage data across the institution. I'm very proud of that because it's something where we had nothing and they come a long way to be ambassadors of this initiative. Like Colin was saying, it's a community effort. Another one was data architecture. Through our work we did in data architecture to enable integrations and to enable moving data across the institution, we created our university data model, which is the blueprint of information for the university. This university data model has been built with the help of the whole community. We have had more than 250 people interact in the working groups to create our university data model. And that has enabled us to move data where the data we know means the same in any application we use. So if we're collecting gender, we know what we're collecting in every single application that integrates with central systems within the institution. Another area, which is kind of the tip, like the biggest one and the cherry on top, is reporting and analytics. So we have made huge progress in creating our university data platform, which is governed data that enables self-service for analytics across the institution. This has been another area that has also helped us create more data literacy and make efforts for better data quality and to continue to grow the initiative of data governance. And finally, we have our data access framework. I'm very proud about that one because the data access framework is kind of the circle where we enable, as part of our data management, allow people to use data and and also for us to know what people are using data for. Mm-hmm. And so it enables us to take initiative and anticipate needs so that later on we can build solutions for people based on the requests we have. This has also helped us organize data access for research purposes, as well as Q&A and other efforts, which in a way are going to take us forward to the GenAI data governance portion of data governance.
Wow, you've been a busy lady, Marcela. Data literacy, common data model, data access, and I'm forgetting one. You have been so busy. Congratulations on all these great initiatives, and which I'm sure are creating a solid foundation for you. Thanks for that. Let's move on to Curtis. And for you at MPAC, right? You've been you similarly, right? You are you've been driving efforts to improve data governance. Could you talk to us a little bit about the initiatives that you've driven to date?
Definitely. So once again, thank you for the question. We have had a very good start of building the data governance office within Impact. I would say that when we first started off with the whole data governance initiative, we were not starting from scratch. We have data governance that are sitting within individual departments. People are that they know about data governance, they know the concept of it, but we are kind of trying to bring it back into a centralized function that allows us to drive more standards. And so having a good foundation, first off, was a good start for us. We did a lot of communications. We did a lot of webinars, right? Telling people what we are, who we are, what do we do, right? Just like what we were just talking about. Our primary focus was really to look at collaboration, right? And be able to aim to work hand in hand with various departments. And I always say this, which is we're trying to ensure that we are being seen more as a partner, as opposed to lesser than more like an auditor or big brother looking over people's shoulder. And so partnership to me and to us as a whole team is truly important, and that message has to get through, right? Otherwise, coming up from a governance shop, you're not going to win any sort of battles if you don't have any friends with you within the organization. So with that being said, we established data ownership, right? First thing we look at is looking at some of the ownership data. How can we sort of dissect some of these data into different pillars? We have created multiple committees, data governance working groups that kind of focus on different business areas and have our data stewards sort of help us to drive these kind of day-to-day operations. Now, one of the goals for us right off the bat was that we wanted to develop a federated data governance model. That means that we're not trying to be a black box and take everything in as one division, but we want to basically share some of the accountabilities, right? So that everyone or every business division who have data expertise can actually feed in their knowledge into this whole data governance framework. And we're leveraging these expertise across the board. And one of the other things is we did not try to boil the ocean right off the bat. Lots of data that we have within Impact, obviously, and we're not going to go in and say we're going to solve all the problems on day one. And so one of the main goals is that we focus on some of the critical data elements, right? So what are the values to the organization? What needs to be solved, and what is on the critical path that we need to get some standards on, and sort of demonstrate that value to of governance practices to the organization. And again, that kind of goes back to the people side, right? We're trying to bring the people along to say, yes, there is a value that we are bringing in for data governance. And with that being said, we start to move into the process type of defense. We start to look at developing a data dictionary, right? We're standardizing a lot of the glossary, right? The business glossary side. We looked at developing more partnership with our IT team on the change management processes, including privacy, right? Including our security team, of course. And trying to make that to ensure that everything will actually go through a proper channel for any sort of data related changes, so that this whole governance is now forming more of a framework. Now, we also did an independent assessment, right, by a third party, just to keep us honest and to ensure that we are right on the right path in terms of maturity, based on the DAMA, so data management model, body of knowledge, as kind of like our baseline, and kind of measure against areas that we need to work on, areas that we are kind of in line with some of the industry standards. And then now, I guess fast forwarding to now is where we started to look at some of the technologies, right? So how can technology help us to sort of achieve what we want to do, right? So better ways of doing data catalog, better ways of doing tagging of data, metadata management, right? Data quality, the whole thing that we can actually utilize some of these technologies to help us in some of these manual interventions. So the process that we have been doing is people, process, technology, and we were not rushing to try to get a tool to solve the problem. And as we all know, that technology it's amazing, it's out there, but it is not the silver bullet to just snap in technology and say we're done. And so we are kind of still on this journey, but I think this journey has given us pretty proud moments during the last couple of years to say that we have achieved a couple key delivery points to actually create this whole data governance office for us.
Thanks for that overview, Curtis. Some similarities with Marcella's journey, but also and some good reminders to think about business partnership and the efforts to create a common language, a common understanding across the organization. We truly appreciate you summarizing all those milestones for us. Colin, let's turn it over to you. I understand that you have a team of 24 across Canada and Chile that are responsible for information management, data governance, and privacy and security. Before GenAI, what would you say your team was focused on? What were the key initiatives that they brought home?
So GenAI, of course, changed everything. And a good example of this was our data governance program. So we were building a data governance program that was built off of an enormous foundation of work that our consulting practice had done, where they looked at, they kind of polled a number of leaders across the organization, a bunch of different areas to identify what are the perceptions that we've got, what are the challenges that we've got with respect to how, as an organization, we manage our own data, how we manage the data that we procure from vendors and third parties, and how in the delivery of kind of analytics and benchmarking services, we're making sure that we're applying consistent approaches and across the standards for client data as well. And so our consulting program had done incredible work here. And then as we looked to the operationalizing of this, it was brought into a central area, which I have the privilege of leading. And so this is a combination of data governance and our information records management and privacy office. And I'll admit, up until you know, about a year ago, give or take a few months, we were really focused on establishing the foundation. Like, what is the foundation for our data governance program? You think about the foundation in the context of like building a house. Like it's the hardest, it's the longest, it's a brutal slog to build your foundation. And sometimes you take a step back and it's hard to really see the progress that's being made. But this is things like the establishment of a number of various different strategic initiatives, like standing up a data governance program and data governance policies and guardrails and guiding principles, standards for data engineering, working with vendor and third-party data. So having a place for this to live, a change management approach, you know, all things that are truly foundational to data governance. And then GenAI kind of came and sort of shifted the script a little bit, and with the amount of focus that happened around that, I suspect we'll probably talk a little bit more about GenAI, but like that has got, I think, more of a laser focus now. But it was fundamentally just about making sure that we had the right governance in place for our data governance strategy. So this was identification of an executive steering committee, the establishment of program steering committees as well. And then ultimately trying to figure out how we operationalize this incredible body of work that our consulting practice had done in a way that is aligned to our culture at Deloitte. There's a kind of this idea of the shoemaker's children, where when it comes to our clients and our clients' data, we are incredible at how we manage this. When it comes to our own analytics and our own insights, a lot of this was happening in different areas. So having a consistent strategy across the board was absolutely necessary so that we could really become data-driven so we could continue on our journey to truly become data-driven.
Thanks for that, Colin. So let's pick up on the setting that you've been describing for us and turn to you, Marcella, right? We're now in 2023. Several months have passed since the introduction of generative AI tools and their implementation into many organizations. How has this changed your portfolio and your vision as a data governance, as a CDO? For some people, it's a paradigm shift. It changes everything. For others, it's just the same old. It's seen as a hype and just a reminder to do more when it comes to data governance. What is your view when you think about data governance in the GenAI era?
So I think there is yes, there's a big shift, but we can leverage a lot of the work we have done already. But I do see that we now have to look at with the lens of generative AI. We cannot just look at with the lens of the administrative data or the research data or the data we collect for external institutions or different groups. So things that I think are really important is we need to rethink a little bit our standards for data collection. So we had put some standards around privacy, around security, around the meaning of data itself, like how you collect each piece of data and how you manage it through the data life cycle. Now we start looking at things like data sharing. So we need to start governing how our data is now shared when it's going to be used for AI models. And we need to be very careful to make sure that we are respectful of people's privacy, but at the same time that we have consent mechanisms for the usage of that data for AI. That's something that before we were not so concerned about because our students did find a waiver and allowed us to use the data for quality assurance purposes, not for research. But now we are thinking of AI, so we need to think differently and get consent for the usage of that data. So our processes for data collection are going to change for sure. I also see that it's really important for us as an institution to put together AI common terminology so that when we're talking about generative AI, we are talking about, we all understand the language and we all understand what we're talking about. So we in UBC, we have started that process already by putting together websites where we explain the different terms within artificial intelligence and what they mean and what are the repercussions for the institution itself. So that's another area where I think it's really important that we expand our initiative to start looking into that and make sure we clearly define the terms in our strategy for generative AI. Another one is the governance for unstructured data. So we did think a lot of our structured data, administrative data, research data, the data sets that researchers collect about the university and they use in their research. But now we are bringing big volumes of data. And we need to figure out how we're going to govern these unstructured data. To be perfectly honest, that's something that I had parked for a bit because I knew it was going to be really difficult. But yeah. I think in a way, the time has come to start thinking of that. And that's something that I'm also kind of looking into, how we are going to start governing our unstructured data as well, which we really didn't have a lot in our plan initially. Data quality becomes now key. So making sure that data is complete, it's accurate, it reflects the reality of what's actually happening, and that it's usable and trustworthy for AI applications. And that's something that we need to make sure we have that before we can start thinking of leveraging our data for that purpose. And so while data quality for us was a priority, especially because UBC was in the middle of the implementation of ERP and changing our central systems, data quality became a huge priority. But now we have to look at it with a different lens, with the lens of completeness and trustworthiness, not so much as the normal standard DQ that we had been working on. So we are going to have to expand in that area as well. Something that I also think we have been working on, but not with the lens of generative AI, is equity and diversity, and making sure we address bias in the data so that, and in our models as well. But talking about the data, we need to work much closely with our equity and diversity team within UBC. We did have some projects already started around student demographic data projects and collection of data for students and faculty and staff. But now I think we need to look at it with different lenses. And it's more about bias than it is about just the collection of these data for analytics. So that's something that I think we're going to have to start thinking on. And we have kind of already started, but we need to have a more concrete, let's say, strategy to deal with that one. Another is making sure that the sources of data for any AI application are documented and trustworthy. And that is something that, because we're going to be consuming huge amounts of data, we need to make sure that we know and we're transparent around the data that's being leveraged for our AI applications. And that is going to be a big thing to do. And to be honest, I haven't really wrapped my head around that one yet, but I know it has to be done, and we need to start looking into that as well. And finally, data augmentation and metadata. We need to have, we have worked a lot on metadata for our administrative and research data. Now we need to start looking further into what metadata we need to qualify our data that is used in any Gen AI applications. Those are kind of, in a nutshell, the things that I thought, oh my God, this is coming my way, this is going to change. And these are the things, at least at the beginning, that I have to look into. So something we have started doing already is identifying gaps between our current data governance strategy and Gen AI. So what do we need to add to our current strategy, to the work we have done so far? For example, I talked about the data access framework. Our data access framework now has to change, because now the usage of AI is, we need to qualify it a little bit differently. And then we need to educate our stewards to provide access to that data if it's going to be used in that way. So there's, I think we have a long way to, and a lot of things that we need to revisit in the work we have done. But I don't see us kind of creating new things. I see us expanding the work we have done, and well, we'll see what else comes our way. But those are the things that for now I have identified. Nice. We need to start looking into. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Marcela, thanks for reminding us of the need to sometimes put new lenses, right? View existing domains, data governance domains, with a new lens. For example, the diversity, equity, inclusion one. And also, thank you for your reminder to continue with some of our current initiatives. Literacy is not going away. We cannot say we've done it. We now have to continue educating on AI and Gen AI. So thanks for that. Sounds like you're paying a lot of attention to the reinforcement you'll need and the new lens you'll need to apply as well. Let's ask you, Curtis, the same question, right? What paradigm shift or more of the same at Impact? How do you think about data governance in the Gen AI era?
Yeah, so I would agree with a lot of that being said. It's, for me, I think it's more of a paradigm shift. But it's not to say that it is that we are starting from scratch. I think we are building, as Marcela was just mentioning, that we are building on what we already have, and it's, you know, the things that we have done before is not going away. So if we were to dive in the impact of, again, Gen AI of the world in data governance, and understandingly there is an increasingly use of AI tools like ChatGPT, we were just talking about it this morning as well. You know, a lot of users are just using it on a day-to-day basis, right? I can see that the volume, complexity of data that any data governance office would have to handle will just skyrocket, right? We could see significant uptick in terms of data that are being generated, data that are being ingested, data that is being processed than any before. Now, with this surge in data, it comes with a trade-off, right? Because there's also a need to establish what we just talked about, is to enforce more of a robust governance practice, right? And these practices typically involve higher data quality standards, privacy, as we just talked about, boosting cybersecurity, that's a huge one, right? Promoting transparency across all the data management stages that we have in place. And AI applications, as we all know, rely significantly on extensive data sets, right? And sometimes these data sets can contain sensitive and personal information that can be unintentionally ended up in the mix. So I'm sure everyone have done this, which I have too, is we just copy and paste whatever that we want to and ask ChatGPT to actually give us an answer. And so this might be unintentional, or it might be intentional, but anything can actually get into this kind of data. So recognizing this challenge, I think becomes very imperative that we need to adopt new rules, right, to deal with the complexity of our privacy issues implementing clear guidelines. So some of the examples would be management of data, anonymizations, right? The acquisitions of consents, or even strict adherences to data protection regulations like FIPA, right? Like PIPEDA, all these other regulations that we need to look into. Now, I do want to emphasize one point, that the importance of collaborations and educations and communications basically in the data governance as a whole, right? So it is imperative that the work that we do to foster a closer partnership with the AI team or the IT team or whoever the team is to actually create this whole Gen AI sort of model. And this is really to set up a clear best practice or guidelines, right, for AI models, whether they are being used for development or for deployment purposes. And it is essential for us to educate our own selves, right, the ins and outs of all the standard and traditional data governance protocols that we have been talking about for years. Now, technologies like ChatGPT, I would say that it significantly expanded our scope of our responsibility within the data governance office. We are faced, honestly, with challenges from handling increased data volumes, right? Safeguarding our privacy, upholding ethical standard, which we'll talk about that a little later as well. Data quality, one of the huge components, right, within the data governance framework. How do we ensure, bias and fairness, right, into our models? And so, just to say that the future roadmap, I think it will involve adopting to the ever-changing new data rules that aligns to the AI-driven landscape.
Super. Thanks for that overview, Curtis. Colin, as our Chief Privacy and Confidentiality Officer and who oversees data governance, how have you been advising our Deloitte leaders on assessing the risks of generative AI while also balancing the business needs to want to use this kind of technology to better serve our clients? How do you provide guidance and balance both the risk and benefits of such a technology?
We use sports metaphors a lot here. I use analogies a lot, and we talk about this kind of like in the context of the offense and the defense. But it's about how we accelerate AI or data-driven growth in a way that builds trust and protects the brand. So, like I was saying earlier, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to build your strong foundation, without fail. And you iterate on this, but once your foundation is set, or at least once it's in progress, then we start looking to get the tools into people's hands, because we want to be sure that we're able to maximize and capitalize on this creativity and on the immense opportunity here. But we have to do it, of course, in a way that is secure, in a way that doesn't create any unmanaged risk. So we think about how are the tools secure? And what's happening with the data, and how are we effectively working with our vendors? So what are the controls we've got in place? Are they technical controls? Are they contractual administrative controls? But you cannot underestimate the importance of vendor risk management here. And then once you've got some level of assurance with your vendors, then how do we once we've got that, how do we get the tools into the hands of our people? And the starting point for that is really like guardrails, guidance, governance. So how do we align to, for example, our existing quality requirements? How do we align to our own trustworthy AI principles? How do we align to our shared values? Because like I said, we want our people to be able to innovate. So we have to get to that understanding of what needs to be true for us to feel comfortable that we've managed the biggest risks without really stifling this creativity or potentially squandering an opportunity. We absolutely need to keep an eye on the regulatory space here too. It's growing in all directions, sort of amorphously across all industries. So what are the things that we need to be aware of? You can look at existing frameworks like NIST or OECD. And I mean, honestly, taking a look at the EU, like that, it has helped us before immensely from a privacy perspective. You see the EU as kind of being the paragon of virtue when it comes to human rights from a data perspective, from a privacy perspective. So it's very easy for us to look ahead to the EU and with some level of confident think that, okay, you know, this is probably a good place for us to keep paying attention to. On the leadership front, like how we help our leaders, Curtis had talked about showing up as a partner, and I think it's absolutely the same here. Like reflecting on the opportunity and addressing the risks can be done fairly easily if you show up as a partner. My office is all in on AI, on generative AI. Like we're absolutely inspired by and excited by how it can revolutionize not only the work that we do internally, how we can serve our clients, our people, how we can serve our communities, but it's also just super cool. And that's one of the things that like has really galvanized us around this technology as well, is that this is something where there is a focal point on generative AI where everybody is talking about it, and it's an enormous opportunity for us to capitalize on that as well. But I think like ultimately for us, it comes back to trust. And that's kind of the simple framing device that I've been using, because trust is really accretive. You build on trust. And it's a language that resonates through our entire organization in a way that compliance just does not. Like we all know that. We may not want to say it out loud, but compliance isn't everybody's favorite language. And so we really try to focus on the building of trust throughout the organization and with our people. And that is the thing that kind of guides our own development of AI and Gen AI solutions.
Sounds good. Thanks, Colin. Let's now move forward 5 years. We're in 2028. Marcela, we meet again. We have the same webcast. And I'm asking you, what are you working on? What are you proud of? What are you celebrating? How are technologies like generative AI going to change what we do as a data governance leader, as a data steward, as a data owner? What should be different 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think probably we will have a more global use of Gen AI. So we will have, for example, our students already use Gen AI for a lot of their assignments. But what do we need to do? We need to set some rules around how you document how you use Gen AI in your assignment or in your work. And so I think it's important that we have standards for AI. So making sure that people understand that yes, you can use it. You should be using it because it like Colin was saying, it's pretty cool. But you have to make sure that you identify issues with the data that you're using. You document the data that you are using for your Gen AI applications. So our first thing will be putting standards together on how you define if this is a biased or not. So putting together something that allows you to know that model you have built have these biases or these issues. And so that's an area where I think it's really important. And I'm hoping that 5 years from now, we already have that in place. Those standards are in place as well. I also hope that by 5 years from now, we can say we have roles and responsibilities around AI, the same way we have them in our normal day-to-day data governance, that we have assigned roles and responsibilities across the institution. So who's going to be in charge of Gen AI in the institution, in the research world, or in the administrative world? Also that we are using it for different areas within administration and for data governance itself. I have an example that it's not Gen AI, but we're thinking of using bots to allow us to identify data quality issues. We know we have the standards, we know we have the stewards, we have the data entry processes. Well, let's put all these together and identify issues with the quality of our data from the get-go, not wait 6 months from now when that issue has been propagated across many other systems. Yeah. Another thing that I think for me is really important is ethical principles around the usage of AI. So make sure that we have alignment in the community, in the university around the ethics of Gen AI and around what are the uses we want to encourage, and what are the uses that we prefer people don't use Gen AI for. And have accountability mechanisms. I know we don't like compliance, but we have to make people accountable. The same way that we say with data governance is everyone's role, it's everyone's job, but we know who's accountable for what. In the case of Gen AI, I see the same thing. I want to make sure that we have set proper accountability across the institution around Gen AI. And the one I also, regulatory compliance, make sure that we are in alignment with any rules, any regulations around the usage of data for Gen AI. And something that's really important, I think, is educate everyone on not only on Gen AI itself, but also continue to educate people on the usage of data, on the concepts of consent, the concepts of privacy, of being respectful, bias, equity, and diversity. So what I see ourselves is leveraging AI for as many usages as we can, but within the context and a proper framework that allows us to have ethical use of our data for the purpose of Gen AI applications.
Thanks for that, Marcela. Curtis, data governance comes with a lot of work. There's a lot of manual tasks today. Generative AI presents an opportunity to both automate and augment what we humans do. What's your take on 5 years from now? Where does generative AI have a role as part of our data governance team?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess in 5 years, I can see that the integration of Gen AI, machine learning, and data governance practice would have a profound transformation, right? That goes beyond just what we were talking about, automations. I think it has the potential to reshape some of the governance paradigm, as we were talking earlier in this call, leading to strategic shifts, right? Enhancing accessibility or usability, again, fostering stakeholder communication, engagement. We talked about data literacy, and even driving data-centric sort of culture. So just to touch on a couple of points in there, strategic shifts, right? So I can see AI enabling data governance to transition from a model where we are reactive right now to more of a proactive one, right? So what I mean by that is instead of, let's say, addressing issues as they arises, this will allow data governance and its framework to predict and prevent issues before they even occur, right? This is being used by, let's say, predictive analytics, right? Teams that can kind of anticipate challenges, but at the same time take preemptive actions to sort of safeguard some of their data integrity and compliance at the same time. The vast majority of data sets, right, that AI is bringing to the table right now, I can definitely see that it not only just provide, data-driven recommendation for the governance perspective, but it also provides much broader organization decision-making processes that can be benefit across the board. Now, when we look at data collection with external sources, I just want to quickly touch on this point because this is also giving us a context of augmenting some of our data quality and landscape, right? This is a unique opportunity where I see in a couple of years from now, where we can enrich our data profile by seamlessly integrating dependable, credible, right, quality, whatever that may be, external data sources. So if we were to imagine that we are able to infuse our customer profile, right, with fresh insights, with geolocation data, with demographic insights, incorporating with real-time market trends. That's a paradigm shift, quite honestly, right, in a way that we can actually better understand our clients or our profiles. And this gives us a better approach in the overall data governance or data management space. Now, in addition to that, I think the system's ability to also provide real-time updates and actively monitor, right, some of the external sources, of course, it's going to give us more current and accurate information, as it is just part of the equation as well. Accessibility and usability, I think we're talking about, data catalog, metadata management, and data presentation. The catalog and tagging of data with relevant metadata, I think it will just make it easier for users to discover and use within the corporation. Again, this is not just serve as a time saver, but I think it will also ensure that data is utilized efficiently and reducing the risk of data misuse or compliance violations. Now, quickly on the context of data presentation. Sorry, I just lost my mind there. So AI, right? I would say that it will probably shake up in a big way, right? It is, again, it's not just about tools or fancy technologies anymore. It is about how we deal with data in general, right? So AI, it's going to be a catalyst, believe it or not, and I'm sure everyone agrees to it, that making data more accessible is a theme, right? It can simplify all these technologies or tricky sort of concepts or tailoring learning experience to fit each person's unique needs. And so making data exploration, I think, much more easier, user-friendly, encouraging the curiosity of the use of data, right? And this typically transformed to us to tear down those kind of technical barriers. So letting folks that might not have deep technical knowledge to begin with can still benefit the understanding the understanding of insights and or well-informed decisions, right? And so just to wrap it up, I think it is quite evident that the horizon of data governance is expanding when Gen AI is coming to play. It is promising as well. We are steering into the future, and it's clear that prioritizing ethics, embracing innovations, right, or staying ahead of delivering data quality and value are just some of the transformative work that we will be seeing in the next 5 years.
Thanks for painting such a compelling future and describing to us example for how we could use technology to advance on some of our data governance efforts. I love the data profiling, data exploration, that being democratized through some modern tools. Really love your examples. Thank you for that, Curtis. Let's go over to you, Colin, ask you the same question, thinking about data governance 5 years from now, and then we'll take the question that we have in the Q&A. So what are your views for what might be different when we think about data governance, privacy, and security 5 years from now versus today?
I love the question. First of all, it's a question that I've asked a number of times in interviews, not the idea of like, where do you want to be in 5 years, but like, where do you think we're going to be in 5 years? I think about it sort of across 3 functions. You've got organizational, technological, and then ultimately to an extent societal. I think from an organizational perspective, from a data governance, data governance area, like it's only going to get more complicated. And so if you're not if you're not working on your foundation, on your policy, on your standardization, on your governance right now, it's going to be that much more difficult, especially when we think about things like the provenance of data for LLMs. Data and AI are going to be woven into every element of the business too. So you can't have silos that separate governance, IT, legal, privacy, your development teams. I think we're going to continue using established foundations and broadening them. So things like privacy by design as a principle is going to start popping up across the organization throughout with an expanded scope, a data by design, an AI by design approach. I think there's going to be a great focus on the idea of data as kind of a means of maximizing shareholder value too. Like if we think about the data that we have, how are we maximizing the value of that data? And if we don't have a true purpose to maximize the value of that data, of course, in a secure and a transparent and ethical way, then what is the purpose of holding on to it as well? From a tech perspective, if we just think about how it's going to impact us within the privacy space, there's enormous opportunity for AI and Gen AI in the enhancement and the democratization, the availability of privacy enhancing technology. So things like homomorphic encryption as something that is built by AI and as something that will facilitate AI, as it'll enable massive AI and machine learning training in a way that preserves privacy and confidentiality of information, unlocking absolutely phenomenal new insights and new opportunities. Gen AI can be used to produce synthetic data in a cost-effective and privacy-preserving way at a scale that we have never seen before as well. And so the ability to use synthetic data to advance privacy or to advance technology development and privacy research is going to be an absolute game changer as well. The flip side, the kind of more sinister side, though, I think is we're going to see AI-driven cyber attacks and we're already seeing this, but at a scale that will continue to grow in an incredibly unsettling way. But ironically, I think is also the kind of thing where you need AI to help prevent against it. And so it's just like in my mind, it's like the computer playing pong against itself at like supermassive speed. It's going to be the ping pong of AI cyber risks versus the expansion of AI technical safeguards. And then I think from a society perspective as well, we think about what the regulatory space is like. I'm really excited to see regulators paying attention here, fully support the development of regulation and policy that encourages innovation and also provides incentive on responsible use. So I hope we continue to see expanded and thoughtful growth in that area, especially when we start expanding the idea of harms, not just to individuals, but to society and to groups. And when we look at maybe having some clarity on intellectual property rights, I think those are going to be key things. Society is absolutely, I mean, between organizations and government, the most vulnerable here, no doubt. So we need to just be deliberate with the choices that we make today and tomorrow. I'm not really a doom and gloom person. Like I said, I'm all in on the tech, but the speed at which Gen AI exploded into our lives caught me off guard. So it makes me think a lot about the Bill Gates quote, where it's something to the effect of like, we overestimate what we can do in a year, but massively underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And if we just look back like 24 months to now, like, and then project that and that rate of change, it's going to be a significantly different world in 5 years. And so we need to be able to keep up with it from a regulatory and a trustworthiness perspective as well.
Thanks, Colin. I want to summarize your point as you're being carefully optimistic or cautiously optimistic overall. Thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Marcela, we have a question from the audience on explainability. Could you comment with a minute or less on your views on what are the key criteria to consider when determining the right level of Gen AI explainability? How do you look at this?
Well, I think we need the model to be explainable. However, we can cater this information to the audience. So the question talks about clients, workforce, or executives. We cater these to executives or to clients or to the workforce in general. But there are some things that I think are really crucial is the process for decision making. So how is the model making decisions? We can go as detailed as we want or very high level, but people need to understand that what data is being used. And this is why I was talking about standardization and concepts of standards for the usage of data. Ethical concerns and biases around the model. Is there anything that we should be looking into for this specific model and making sure that it has regulatory compliance? So to looking at those things, I think transparency becomes the key thing within that. And I can give an example. In UBC, we developed an enrollment planning model that allowed us to know what was going to be the revenue for each one of the faculties. People were just getting a number. It's going to be this number. No, they were looking for more. They need to understand how the decisions were made within this model. They need to understand what data we used. They need to understand all these concepts before they can trust the model. So the more explainable we make it, the more trustworthy it is to people. So I do think all the audiences the information may be catered for each one of those audiences, but they all need to understand and make sure they can trust the model as it has been built.
Super, thanks for that. And very quickly too, because I do want to answer the question, Curtis, your views in a minute or less on technical skills, soft skills to cultivate, to be able to embrace this technology shift.
Yeah, so those are two definitely critical components. Very quickly, I think from a technical skills standpoint, deep learning, advanced AI models, those will be crucial to sort of understand and have a good backbone of what some of the modern AI applications technologies are being doing. I would also add to say that we should look at some of the data cataloging or governance tools, right? So these are tools that provide data catalog, data lineage, metadata management, right? Even a bit of the data quality from an AI perspective would help. And this, there are tools out there that I'm not going to name names, but it will actually help us to drive towards that angle. From a soft skill standpoint, definitely collaboration. I think or at least I mentioned that a couple of times, that we need to have cross-functional collaborations across the board. Business units, legal, security, privacy, those are all important. Change management is a huge thing, right? For me, I think the success that we brought to the data governance office is all about change management. And quite honestly, I think we see ourselves as a change agent, because we are actually moving or bringing a moving target along with us to ensure that we are keeping everyone informed, everyone communicated, and everyone providing that necessary knowledge to understand why we're doing it, and then what we are doing it, and how we're doing it. So within that minute, hopefully I answered that question.
You did it. Curtis, Marcella, Colin, thank you for answering my questions, answering our audience's question. Really delighted to have received your views on data governance in the generative AI era. To our audience, stay tuned. There will be a quick survey following this to capture your data points, and transparently we use that to improve our webcast every time. I wish you all an excellent afternoon. Thanks again, everybody.